Funding for this program is provided by Annenberg CPB to advance excellent teaching.
It's very helpful for students to hear another student explaining why they arrived at a particular answer.
Together that would make one.
It was a perfect opportunity for them to see the consistency of the membrane and to see they can't see the pores. So that was a learning experience for them.
I'm really trying to help frame a discussion for them so that the inquiry can deepen and we can get to deeper levels of evidence and argument.
We get to know each other, we talk about family.
I have to learn about them.
What are their responsibilities to their communities?
All the kids are really good if you just sit down and listen.
I rephrase the question. Maybe the question was wrong.
So that they have an awareness, an education, and a tolerance for other cultures.
You improvise every step of the way.
I know what a certain child's best is, and I expect that.
It makes me feel really happy to be a teacher. I'm kind of choked up.
Every teacher knows there is always too much to teach. How do you decide, subject by subject, what's most important? How can you help your students to understand the big ideas of the disciplines they're studying? How can you get them to think and act like historians, mathematicians, or scientists? I'm Linda Darling Hammond, and that's our challenge for this session of the Learning Classroom. Every discipline has a set of big ideas that are connected to each other and provide the glue that holds the subject area together. These include ideas like ratio and proportion, balance and equilibrium in mathematics. In biology, we might think of major themes like evolution, adaptation, and the environment. Each discipline also uses particular methods of study that reflect how knowledge is built in that field. For example, scientists do experiments and historians evaluate historical evidence from different perspectives. To really master a discipline, students need to understand what the big ideas are and how they're connected. If they learn to think like experts in that field, their learning will be much more efficient.
If I'm a physician and I'm doing an examination of you, I don't just randomly say, let me look at your nose, how's your toe? I have a structure. It's the structure of the human body, and it's of its organ systems. So I will systematically check the gastrointestinal tract. I will check the respiratory system, the cardiovascular system, the neurological, right? Because not only does that give me a structure for moving through the examination, it also structures my memory for any signs or symptoms that I encounter that may be relevant to diagnosing what you have. So every time we call something a subject matter, I would say, we call it that because it has some principle of organization that connects the ideas with one another, that gives them some kind of order, some sort of meaningfulness. And it's like a code.
Julie Helber, a fourth grade teacher at Paddock Elementary School, helps her students to think and act like scientists and mathematicians as they learn about static electricity and fractions. She guides them through their inquiries by modeling the steps that experts follow in those fields. And then she gives them an opportunity to practice doing what scientists and mathematicians do.
Rub it on his hair too? You see his hair move back and forth?
There's a magnet.
You think it's a magnet? And what happens when you rub the balloon on your hair? Your hair sticks out? Why do you think that happens?
Since we can't come to the rod, our hair does, since it's the lightest thing on our body.
Okay. Does anybody have another experience?
I think because when I went on the slide around here, you always get shocked and stuff,
The students are experiencing a first-hand investigation with electricity. So they're actually working with materials and figuring out which materials are static and which materials are not static in several trials and experiments. Later, we studied a second-hand observation where the students looked at a notebook text from a particular student, and we read through the notebook text together to make some more meaning of what we were learning about static electricity. And we really tried to utilize the text and draw on what we already knew about static electricity to make some conclusions or some hypothesis about static electricity. And Rochelle says she gets shocked. Are there any other cases where you've gotten shocked by something? Any other times? Josh?
We live on a farm, and when we had cows, we had electrical wires, and like I would accidentally touch it and I wouldn't really be able to let go. I would really have to force myself to let go.
You have a lot of knowledge right now about static electricity. What I'm going to be giving you are some materials that you will be working with a partner to use, okay? You're going to be trying to create charges between the interactions of the materials that are in this bag. So how could I record your results for that? Jasper?
Just make two columns, one for if it had electricity and the other if it didn't. You could just check one.
Okay. The value in setting up the experiment this way, by allowing the students to investigate something that they might not have clear and concrete directions for, there's a lot of value in it. And what I see as the most valuable is that the students are constructing meaning by actually using these materials in a way that they have chosen. So I haven't determined how they're going to use the materials and told them exactly what to do. Because I want them to err in what they're doing. I want them to see that they've tested or tried something and it doesn't work, because that's really when they learn. If I tell them how to do it, it's not likely they're going to remember it later, but if they actually learned it while they were doing it, it is likely that they would remember it later. When there are a variety of opinions regarding a particular topic, really I think that's the meat of teaching. The students interacting with each other or saying, well, I disagree with another student is probably the best thing that can happen in my classroom.
The notion of structure in mathematics is probably one of the most obvious ones. Mathematics is a field where most people who teach mathematics will readily understand the notion that there are certain kinds of structures. There's a notion of balance. There's a notion of equilibrium. There are notions of ratio and proportion that just keep on coming up again and again and again. And whether you're doing primary arithmetic or you're doing algebra, those notions repeat themselves, and you get a sense of how these organizations really make sense of the subject.
I always offer lots of options for the students to demonstrate what they know. If they need to come up, today we were doing a math lesson and somebody said, can I come up there and show you? Is this rectangle up here divided into thirds? And you need to be able to explain it to me. Okay, I need somebody that's saying no to raise your hand and explain why you're saying no. Melissa?
First, there's 2 rows of 4, and then they have 1 extra and a half. It's a half extra part.
Can you come up and show, because I'm not sure?
Yep.
I get it.
They had added 1 extra part onto it.
Okay.
And then they have that extra one.
Okay. So how many? You're saying it has an extra one. What do you mean by that?
There's just this 1 extra triangle sitting there.
No, it's in.
Oh, wait.
It's in the other one.
What are you thinking about? Melissa, can you tell me right now what you're doing to check that?
I'm checking it to counting by these squares.
So
one less. It's a half less.
Okay.
Yeah, half less.
Can I
Okay.
explain?
Yes, Brian, you want to explain? Okay.
If you folded this, they have too little. This one has too much. This one's right.
Okay.
Yeah, this one's right, but these two are wrong.
Yeah, this one they should take the half off of the 8 and put it onto the 7.5 to make 8.
Okay, so if I drew a line like this and gave that one, then would it all be divided into thirds?
If that one was on that one, yeah.
Take that line off, that diagonal line off. So this line off, and then we'd have thirds.
Yeah.
Okay, good. It's very helpful for students to hear another student explaining why they arrived at a particular answer, because it may not have been the way that they were thinking. And so by hearing how somebody else is thinking, it goes back to me modeling how I'm thinking about things, and to maybe change their way of thinking or to expand the way that they think.
Did you notice how Julie tried to ensure that her students would understand not only the content they were studying, but also the process of experimentation that is central to science, and the search for patterns that is at the heart of mathematics? 10th grade biology teacher Mary Edmonds helps her students understand cell biology by first connecting the issues of disease to the drama of the science fiction novel Andromeda Strain. She then engages them in the scientific method so they can examine the features of cell membranes for themselves.
Adolescents have to have hands-on investigations. They have to feel like they're a part of the learning process. They have to be able to take ownership of their own learning, and they have to be able to feel that they're a part of the learning and that they can take it out into the world and utilize it, especially urban youth. Urban youth need to understand that they can do it. They have the tools. They are scientists, and that they can go on and they can become a big part of this world. And the way you do that is for them to see relevance. So how do you get them to see relevance in cells? They have to know that they're made of cells. They have to know that the anthrax scare was not beyond their ability to cure. They have to know that bacteria can be grown, but that they have the scientific ability and the knowledge to destroy it. But they have to know the internal structure of a cell in order for them to take that knowledge out into the real world and solve any problems.
Did Andromeda Strain like or dislike a high alkaline level?
Dislike.
You got it. So the optimal range for Andromeda Strain was not alkaline, correct? That's why it did so well in the human body. Do we like alkaline? No. That's why it did so well in the human body. So if we get away from our normal metabolism, we do not stay at homeostatic conditions, do we? All right. So diffusion would be best within the cell, moving around within the cell at body temperature. Let's look at it, okay? Let's say that this warm is body temperature and this is cold. Who can give me a hypothesis for which of these containers will have the best diffusion or the fastest diffusion?
I believe the cold water will have the most diffusion because
students love to be called scientists. I mean, I like to think of myself as a scientist. And if I tell them that you are now a scientist, you're working on an investigation, they're really more interested in it. When they put a lab coat on, a whole new aura comes over them, that this is really important, that this is really scientific.
So, since we're scientists ourselves, right? We want to find out if it's true that the cellular membrane is permeable, means it lets things in and out, right? So we're going to use an egg, okay, everyone? We're going to use an egg.
You see in the classroom when I asked the students, how would you get the membrane initially? That a lot of them thought, well, I'll boil the egg. Because they took their past experiences, they boiled the egg, they peel it off, the membrane's right there. But I had to get them to understand that this is a living cell, and a living cell has cytosol. It has cytoplasm that surrounds the nucleus, so you can't do that, so what are you going to do?
Yeah, and it start cracking and it start peeling off. And then you ain't never burnt no egg, have you?
Like hardwood eggs, like you do for Easter. Like hardwood eggs. Like,
and after a while it starts to crack.
You said it's more acidic.
Okay.
So it could be like lemon juice.
I say vinegar.
They have to feel secure in making a mistake and not thinking that they're going to be ridiculed by me or the other students in the classroom, and they have to be able to take chances. I don't know everything, and the kids can ask me something, and if I don't know it and I tell them, I'm going to look it up, They feel more secure with me asking them questions and them not knowing the answers. But the best thing to do is to go around and catch it. Catch them while they're doing it and get them to think about it.
What do you think?
We think to boil it.
All right, why?
Because when you, like with an egg, when you boil an egg, I know about everybody in here that boiled the egg before. If you keep on letting it boil, the shell is going to begin to crack, and the shell is going to start to peel off. The shell going to start to peel off.
All right, now Nicole, when you peel it off, what is the first thing that you see?
The skin of the.
That's right, and it would mimic the cell. So in theory, they're absolutely correct because I didn't give enough information. Now, I should have been very, very specific and said this was a liquid solution. Now, remember, it's only a substance that we used from the pH lab. Your logic is excellent. That would be the easiest way to truly show the membrane. The easiest way to truly show the membrane. What did your group figure out?
The answer is vinegar because it'll like melt the shell and like turn the inside of the egg like jelly.
All right, she's absolutely right. Absolutely right.
And see, I had the students decide how to dissolve it. And then that made them interested. If I would have just said, okay, today you are going to dissolve the membrane of an egg in vinegar, they would have said, okay, today. And if I would ask them 2 days later, what did you dissolve? What acid did you use? They would say, I don't know, whatever you told us to. But see, now if I asked them, they would say vinegar, and I would say, why? Because the pH is low enough to dissolve the membrane, to dissolve the eggshell without affecting the membrane. So that's why I did that. A couple of the groups broke their egg accidentally, and they thought, oh, the experiment is now a disaster. But I wanted them to understand that that happens to scientists, that there's limitations in life. But the scientific word is a limitation.
What's the problem? What happened? What is this? You're a scientist.
Limitation.
Why is it a limitation?
Because all the membrane, all the shell was gone for the
membrane is off.
Were you, okay, exactly. What is this?
The membrane.
All right, let's look at it.
Yeah.
All right, can you describe the membrane now?
It's rubbery, like almost as a balloon.
Absolutely. So if it's rubbery, does it have pores in it?
Yes.
But we can't see them. How can you prove there are pores in this?
Microscope.
But without a microscope, how could you prove in your scientific investigation
because the vinegar got in.
It was a perfect opportunity for them to see the consistency of the membrane and to see they can't see the pores. They cannot see the pores, but they're microscopic. Well, they read that, or they learned that in some past experience that we've done, because I didn't lecture to that. So that was a learning experience for them.
What happened?
It rose. It way more.
It weighed more.
Yeah.
There you go.
It blew up like a balloon.
You got it. Hey, look, a red blood cell. A red blood cell, if it's put in a hypotonic environment, does it burst?
I think it's important for them to take the idea of cells to cellular membrane and then how the different solutions affect the passage across the membrane. Problem solving is so essential in life. If students do not know how to problem solve, they're not going to be able to make it in college. But when I get them to problem solve, and I can get them to problem solve, that's where it all comes together.
Mary's students were able to solve both a fictional and a real-life problem by working together using the scientific process. But what if Mary were teaching history instead, where the process of finding the truth is not so clear-cut?
Let's just take it for a given that experiment is a great idea in science. And now we start learning history. Well, how do you do an experiment in history? Well, you suddenly realize that that's not the way you do history. We can't put one historical period in an experimental group and another one in a control group and see what the difference is. That we're still doing comparisons. We're still trying to create evidence. I mean, there are certain ideas that do cut across. Notions of description, of analysis, careful observation, notions of what is the evidence for your claim, notions of theory, but the fundamental process of experimentation, which is at the heart of work in science, has no real analogy in history if what you mean by experiment is that the scientist is controlling conditions and studying what happens under conditions that she herself has controlled. So what does a historian have to do? The historian, in some sense, has to look for comparisons where, if you will, nature has made experiments, not scientists.
Avram Barlow, a 12th grade history teacher at the Urban Academy, confronts this challenge every day. He has his students read the primary source materials for the period they're studying so that they can explore the events and opinions of the time and understand the perspectives that shaped historical decisions. He focuses on central ideas like governance and human rights, and he raises essential questions like who should govern and why.
Let me try to just give it a little bit more context for a second and refresh your memory. Johnson decides that he's going to implement a lot of Lincoln's Reconstruction Plan, which is pretty lenient on the South. What that allows to happen is it allows state governments to be created all across the South. They passed these black codes that we were about to look at. Okay? These black codes are laws passed by southern state governments. Now, what do these laws do? What I asked them to do was to look at that material and to actually look at the text of these laws and decide for themselves what they thought the laws were designed to do, why they thought they were created, how they would have been defended by the people who wrote them. And you saw in the class there were multiple interpretations of that. And the discussion hinges upon multiple interpretations of the meaning of these codes through the looking at the evidence that the reading presented. Hey, page 3, section 9, go ahead.
If any person shall persuade or attempt to persuade, entice, or cause any free man, free Negro, mulatto to desert from illegal employment, and I don't have to read all that. Basically what it says is just like, if a guy leaves his job, anyone else who tries to hire him, or tries to give him food or clothing or anything else, they can be fined and put in jail. So it's beyond even like trying to keep them down. It's like, all right, even if you want to help them, we're not going to let you.
I think this gets to the heart. You're saying this is like slavery. Matt's saying it's not great, but it's not quite the same thing as slavery. Let's try to figure out what this means, and does this support Stephanie or does this support Matt?
If you look at them individually, they don't seem that bad. And you're like, okay, that makes sense. It's job training. But when you look at them as a whole, it just totally restricts what you're saying. If you want to hold, freed slaves up to the same standards as white citizens, why are you going to make a completely different set of books for them?
When we respond to arguments, we're responding to them on the basis of evidence. When we present them, we present evidence to support them.
It says freedmen and then free Negroes. It's like two separate categories.
And white people who hang out with black people.
Yeah, so I think it's like backing up like the 10 Commandments, which nobody's complaining about, like thou shalt not commit adultery. It's just backing up what's moral.
Stephanie?
It says in it that if you associate with free men, free Negroes, and mulattoes on terms of equality, then you're a vagrant. How is that moral and how is that anywhere in the 10 Commandments?
You really need to look at the text when she makes a counter-argument to you based on evidence. She's saying that all white persons assembling with freedmen, free Negroes, or mulattoes, or usually associating with freedmen, free Negroes, or mulattoes on terms of equality. So a white person who's hanging out with a black person and treating them as an equal, she's saying can be a vagrant, and that's not morality to her. The evidence is always central. And what's your evidence, and how do we analyze a piece of evidence? There was an exchange there where that happened, where a kid had not read the material beforehand, was sort of glancing through it as we spoke, and he was making some arguments, and then some other kid said, wait a second, go back to the text. You're making a generalization about this. So I come back to this. What should be done with these guys who would pass these kind of laws? Should they be allowed to be in the government? Michelle is saying they should be as long as they... I'm really trying to help frame a discussion for them so that the inquiry can deepen and we can get to deeper levels of evidence and argument. And that's basically what's going on. There's an exchange of ideas there, but that's not a willy-nilly exchange of ideas. It's an exchange of ideas that's happening within the framework of an inquiry that's rooted in questions that I've designed.
Okay, how are you going to say I want to enjoy all the rights of being an American when like a month and a half ago I was ready to kill you because I don't like America? You should be able to reap the benefits of something you were trying to destroy a couple weeks ago. That's not right. Michelle.
Part of the war was to keep the Union together. You know, you can't have a country together when you're pushing away half of it. You have to have the Congress and senators from, you know, the other states. You have to have representatives, and even if they did not agree with what you wanted or like what you wanted for the country or whatever, you still had to have it, or else there would be no union. You know, what's the point? What's the point of having a war over keeping them together if you're going to push them out after it is over?
They're beginning to answer things like, they're looking at the question of the freedmen after the war in the context of the Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln's role, the slaves' self-emancipation. They're building on what they already know. So there's an intellectual growth, I think, that you can see.
What's really important as teachers teach different disciplines to students is for the students to appreciate that there are certain kinds of ideas, like description, like analysis, like careful observation, like evidence, inference, and theory, if you will, that are useful across disciplines. But there are other ways in which very important methods of work in one discipline just don't show up in another discipline. And I think history and science make a lovely contrast here. History and literature also make a lovely contrast. There are different canons that we use for determining whether it's a good novel or a bad novel, and they're not the same as the ones we use for determining whether something is good history or bad history, unless we're going to use the novel for teaching people history. And so here again, understanding the differences in what counts as evidence, in what counts as knowing a subject between subjects becomes terribly important for teachers to understand and in turn for students to understand.
Julie Helber, Mary Edmonds, and Avram Barlow teach the central ideas of their subject matters while they also teach their students the skills necessary to learn on their own. By helping their students to think and act like experts in each field, they're not just giving them fish, they're teaching them how to catch them, a skill that will keep their students nourished intellectually for the rest of their lives. This is the Learning Classroom. Thanks for watching.
Funding for this program is provided by Annenberg CPB to advance excellent teaching.